Edward Paul, both part of our PAC committee. And we're here to just expound on so many issues that are happening. We want to make sure that you are informed. We want to allow you the opportunity to ask questions. Again, welcome. Thank you for being with us here today. Shaniqua?
Yes, excited again to bring you another round of candidate interviews where you get to hear directly from them where they stand on issues that are important to us. And that way, when we go to the polls, we can make an informed decision and vote for a candidate that best represents our needs.
And Edward, as our PAC chairman, please inform us today a little of what we have to look forward to. We know that both candidates were invited. Can you expound on that information for us, please?
Oh, yeah, as always, we are a nonpartisan organization, so we did invite both Republican candidate and former Lilburn Mayor Johnny Crist, as well as incumbent and Democratic candidate Jasmine Clark, 2 weeks in advance. Unfortunately, former Mayor Crist, Johnny Crist, reached out to me on Friday of this week and just now explained that he was not able to make it since he had a prior engagement due to scheduling conflict. We did reach out to him multiple times, as well as we reached out to Democratic candidate Jasmine Clark as well to get their feedback on whether they can be here well in advance. Unfortunately, he just said he couldn't make it. And even though the email address we use came from the Secretary of State website, that's what he registered as a candidate with, he said he doesn't check that email. So I don't get why you would put that as a email you would use to register as a candidate and nobody's looking at it. But that's fine. Whatever the case, we will go on. We will continue to invite candidates from both parties. Matter of fact, hopefully in a couple of weeks, we'll have a Republican candidate that's running for senator that the Democratic candidate don't want to come or say they can't make it or don't have time. But we'll work it out.
So to be totally transparent, we have also been informed that this is not the first candidate forum that candidate Crist has not made. So we do these events for the candidates so that they can be transparent, give their platforms, inform and educate our public on the positions and that jurisdictionally affect their community. We see this as an opportunity. And again, we do want to thank our participant, Dr. Jasmine Clark, for coming. At this time, let's see if we can enter into the room. Dr. Clark, how are you this evening?
All right, so it looked like we lost Dr. Clark. She is having some connection issues, so hopefully she'll be back in. So I guess at this time we can make some announcements about upcoming events that we have going on.
Well, at this time, we want everybody, and we are sure that you are aware that October 11th is the last day to register to vote if you are going to cast your ballot in the November 8th election. Again, October 11th is the last day to register to vote for you to be eligible to vote in the November 8th election. The Gwinnett NAACP PAC and our Get Out the Vote drive, we have been knocking on doors. We have been calling. We have been texting. Our numbers I just received from Edward on today. Since the 2 weeks, in 2 weeks, your Gwinnett NAACP has knocked on over 1,000 doors. We have sent over 5,000 calls, and we have placed over 50,000 texts. Your Gwinnett NAACP in action. And that's all because of you. You committing, you partnering, and you working with us to get out this information. Kudos to our PAC. kudos to the chair for getting this extensive job completed. Thank you.
And I'll just make one quick correction. That 1,000 doors was the first weekend. We did not canvas last weekend because we thought the weather was going to be bad. But so we did that just that first weekend. We had to make that up this week. So we should have even bigger numbers after this weekend, shall I say.
Wonderful, wonderful. And we still are looking for volunteers to assist. We will be having campaigns to canvas, call, and text. So if you are interested, please contact us through our volunteer portal at our NAACPGwinnett.org. That's NAACPGwinnett.org. Please feel free to reach out to us. There is also a stipend attached. If you are interested, find out, contact us, go to knocking, go to calling, texting. Let's see if Dr. Clark may be available now.
Hi, everybody. I'm here.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. And at this time, if Ms. Levin, if Shaniqua Levin, if you would give us our ground rules for today, that would be excellent.
Okay. Well, again, welcome here. Thank you for taking your time to be here to let your voters know where you stand on different issues and be available to answer our questions. So you will be given 1 minute for your opening, just to let us know about you and your platform. And then we'll be starting with a bunch of questions in which you'll have 2 minutes to respond. Because there is no other candidate, we know that there's not going to be a rebuttal. So we'll go from question to question, and then we'll pause at a moment and see if we have some questions from the audience, and which we'll ask you those as well. And then we'll go back to our questions. And then at the end, you'll have a minute to give us your closing statement. The timer will go off at each milestone. And once the timer goes off, that's when we just ask you to cease talking in that moment.
Okay.
Any questions?
All
right.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay.
So should I go ahead and start my introduction?
So give me 1 moment and we can get started. Okay. Let's put the stopwatch on.
Now, you know we have to time politicians because we give you the mic, you guys will never stop. So we're getting that timer ready for you.
I will concede that might be true.
Okay, let's get started.
All right. Well, first, thank you very much to the Gwinnett NAACP for hosting today's event. I think events like this are very important for the people to have an opportunity to hear from the people that are asking for them to vote for them. My name is Dr. Jasmine Clark, and I am the state representative for Georgia's House District 108, which encompasses the city of Lilburn and surrounding unincorporated areas of Norcross, Stone Mountain, Lawrenceville, and a little tiny bit of Snellville. So I am really excited about being here and answering questions from people, but just a little teeny tiny bit about me. The doctor in my name comes from my PhD in microbiology. I'm not your typical politician, and I ran to bring a science voice to the Georgia State Legislature. And since being elected, that's what I have tried to do. I have tried to hold my colleagues accountable and to make sure that we have an open and transparent government for the people.
Okay, that scared me. I was so into what you were saying. Okay, well, thank you. We are going to begin with our first question.
Okay.
Our first question is around minimum wage. Georgia has one of the lowest minimum wages. Because of the Federal Fair Labor Standards Act, the minimum wage in Georgia is $7.25 per hour. Meanwhile, the actual living wage for a single person in Georgia is $17.64 per hour. If elected to office, what will you do to bring the state closer to a living wage?
So that's an excellent question. And first, since I have already been in office, I have stood with my friends in the labor unions and fought for 15, as they would say. I have fought for the $15 minimum wage. And, you know, the interesting thing about that fight is as we were fighting for a $15 minimum wage, $15 became even not enough for some people to live in certain places in Georgia. But the fact that right now in Georgia, the actual on the books minimum wage for the state of Georgia is $5 and something. And because of federal laws, we are at $7.25. That's less than half of what you would need in order to work a full-time job and be able to have a home to go home to, and be able to afford that home. It is my opinion that it is inhumane that people would go to work for hours, 40 hours, sometimes 50 and 60 and 70 hours per week, and still not be able to afford a decent place to live. It's unfathomable to me that we have people working in our communities, serving our communities that can't afford to live in our communities because of the rising prices in living expenses, but the stagnant wages. And so we have to continue to fight for 15. But in my opinion, we're at that point now where once we get to 15, we can't stop. We still need to make sure that wages are matching the cost of living in the places that people want to live or need to live in our state. And I've been fighting for that, and I will continue to fight for that.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is around affordable housing. Please explain why you feel affordable housing should be or should not be part of the local or state governmental budgets.
So again, to the question that you asked before this, we have people who cannot even afford to live in the communities that they work in. People like teachers, people like firefighters, people like police officers, people who are legitimately serving the community in their capacity, in their career. This is what they have dedicated their life to, and they can't even afford to live in those communities. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't add up. And so I do think that it is incumbent upon the government to make sure that we are instituting policies that make it affordable for people to live in our communities. Why are we pricing out the very people who we want in our communities, that we need in our communities? And so, policies like making sure that we have, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. I don't know if y'all can hear my dog. She's going crazy. But policies that stop, for example, all the investors from buying up all the properties from regular everyday people who want to live in those homes. And then after buying up those properties, they then turn around and either want to rent them out for rents that people just cannot afford, or they basically create a false market as far as the value of the homes around, because they're buying homes that sometimes are not necessarily worth what they're willing to pay for them in order to flip them. And so it affects everyone. It affects our entire community. So affordable housing is something that we need for our workers, for people who have their careers, for our elders, to make sure that they're not getting priced out of their homes. It is something that the government should care about.
Okay. And just because the question also asks if you felt like it should be part of the local government or state governments.
I think it's both. I think it needs to, the local government is really where the actual specific policy will be made. But at the state level, there are things that we can do. There are prohibitions that we can put into place, or there are policies that we can implement to make it easier for our local governments to also implement good policy when it comes to affordable housing.
Okay. And then one other question about that is, well, two other questions, but this one in particular when it comes to the affordable housing, because you touched on some policies that you feel like could work on, but another piece to it is Georgians are required to make 3 times their rent. So if they haven't received an increase in pay, minimum wage is extremely low. If reelected, what can you do about that to create a support for lower rental rates and the excessive income requirements?
So I think you bring up a good point. So you've been working at your job and you've been paying your rent faithfully. And then all of a sudden you get a letter in the mailbox that says that your rent is about to go up. And right now we do not really have any way of protecting people from exorbitant rate increases. And this definitely happened during and after the pandemic, where a lot of landlords were trying to, I guess, recoup some of their losses. And they did that by trying to raise rents or price people out. So they had to move so they can move someone else in at the much higher rent. We have to find policies that prevent that. Right now, the state of Georgia is very, 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 very friendly to landlords and slumlords, unfortunately. And the regular everyday person that has to live in these places has very little recourse. And so we have to do something about that. But additionally, when it comes to the income requirements themselves, I think we need to take a look at that. I think when you have, and so in Georgia, it's 3 times. I know I've heard in other places something like 10 times, like your annual salary has to be like 10 or 20 times what the rent is. It's ridiculous. We have to look at those policies. I'm not sure if that is a state level thing or if that would be something that can be done at the local level. But whatever can be done at the state level, I'm willing to listen, because I think that people we have to have shelter. And so shelter is a human right. It's something that we need. And so we need to make sure that people can afford to live. We should not have policies that put more people on the streets and keep people in homes.
I appreciate it. Sounds like you're supportive of this, but you did say that you're willing to listen, right? And sometimes if you're willing to listen, we also, how does that turn into you being proactive? Because if you're in office, you know what can and can't be done. And the people that are coming to give you the stories are relying on you to give them solutions. So outside of listening, how will you provide solutions?
So the reason why I say listen is because housing and housing policy is not my area of expertise. And so a lot of times I do have to sit down and listen to the people to find out exactly what the issue is, so I can figure out exactly what I can do in the position I am in order to push forward good policy. So there are groups out there that focus on affordable housing. I would like to sit down with them and talk with them about what policies we can put in place that will actually be meaningful. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of times we can think up things that we think will be meaningful or we think will work. And the people who work on this day in and day out are like, this is my area. Why didn't you just ask me? Why would you just go and do the X, Y, and Z when we've been working on this and this type of policy for decades or for years, and we have the answers for you, but you never came to us. And so I think it's important to engage those people. I understand, even though I am a policymaker, I am not an expert in all things. And so I really, truly do rely on the experts, on the people who work on affordable housing policy to help me in that regard. The policies that they feel will help people, I would love to put those in place. I just really quickly want to give an example of how there was a policy that everyone thought would help with affordable housing. But then when we actually talked to the affordable housing people who work on this as a part of their job, people who work with the homeless community, or people who work with people who are more in transitional housing and don't really necessarily have a stable home, they said this policy sounds great on paper, but implementation wise, this is actually worse for affordable housing. And so that's why we have to have a listening ear. It's not enough to just throw things at the wall and see what sticks. We really need to lean on the people who are experts in this field and ask them, what do you need us to do? And then go from there and implement those policies.
Okay, thank you. You also touched on homelessness a bit. You mentioned homelessness. Do you feel that the private sector should be more involved in the issue around homelessness, or government?
I think it's everyone. I think that when we have people who are in our communities that do not have a stable place to live, and then let's be clear on what the definition of homelessness is, because a lot of people think being homeless means that are, living in a tent in the woods or living under a bridge or something like that. And that's not always the definition of homelessness. Homelessness is basically not having a stable place to live. So if you are living in your car, or if you're living in a place where at any moment they could just kick you out and say, all right, time for you to go, get out, you're gone. If you're couch surfing, you could technically fall under the definition of unhoused. And because of that, that's an everyone issue. It's a community issue. So I would love to see our private sector step up. But I also think that it is incumbent upon the government to step in. And the reason why is because we are the government of the people. And that includes the people who have homes and the people who don't have homes. And so we need to make sure that we have policies in place that really do reach out to that homeless population and do all that we can to lift them up out of that situation and get them into a more stable situation, especially when we're talking about children and things like that. And just making sure that I just think that that's better for the entire community when everyone is involved, all hands are in the pot and not just one or the other.
Okay. Thank you for that. Okay, so we're going to move on to healthcare.
Got it.
In the U.S., Georgia has the second highest rate of maternal mortality, and Black people are impacted at a disproportionate rate. If reelected, what will you do to improve that rate?
So one of the reasons, so I currently work at a school of nursing. And so this is a topic that comes up a lot in my full-time job as an educator in nursing, as well as my part-time job as a legislator in policy. And the truth of the matter is there are policies that we could implement right now today that will help to chip away at those numbers. One of those policies is Medicaid expansion. Right now, we have people who are not going to the doctor. They're not going to the doctor because they don't have insurance and they can't afford to go to the doctor. Well, guess what? When you decide that you are ready to have a child or get pregnant, right then you have access to another type of Medicaid called pregnancy Medicaid. However, in preparation and preparing your body for pregnancy, there are a lot of things that you should consider. And a lot of times people have not had any type of physicals, any type of physician's visits until they are actually pregnant. And that is when they're finding out other things that are going on with their body, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. And a lot of these things contribute to maternal mortality. Additionally, when you don't have access to healthcare, you don't have access to mental health care as well. And there are people even with insurance that don't have access to mental health care. Mental health care also contributes to our maternal mortality rates. So it's a bigger picture when we talk about chipping away or reducing this rate of maternal mortality in our state. It starts with giving people access to healthcare. And then secondly, especially when it comes to Black women, it starts with making sure that we actually believe women. We listen to them when they say something is wrong. I do not feel right. There's something happening in my body. Our medical community really needs to step up in that regard because right now, a lot of Black women aren't listened to.
Yes, very, very true. One other question about healthcare is, what will you do if reelected, to protect women's rights, especially over the issue of abortion?
So I have been a strong proponent of reproductive rights. I completely feel like it is not the government's responsibility to tell someone what they can and cannot do with their body. Secondly, I think it's equally important that we recognize the ramifications of bans on any type of healthcare, but specifically abortion care. When you put bans on abortion care, you put people's lives in danger because every abortion is not the same and every abortion story is not the same. And it's important for us to not take options off of the table for anyone, because that abortion could save the life of someone who really truly wants children, but this pregnancy is killing them. That abortion could save the life of someone who is in an abusive situation that wants to get out of that situation, and a pregnancy could hold them or keep them in a place that they don't want to be. That abortion could help the victim of rape or incest. But even if none of those are their story, the point is it's not the government's job to step into that doctor's office and tell someone what to do with their body. We should trust people to know what they need for themselves, and we should give them access to those things and not take access to healthcare away under any circumstances whatsoever.
Thank you for that. Edward?
Thank you. I guess my turn to pick up on the questions, and just want to let the audience know, Representative Clark represents District 108 House District, so she is your state representative. I think the overwhelming majority of her district is Lilburn, the city of Lilburn, and it may spill over in some other cities around the county, or around the county. But Lilburn, if you live in Lilburn, it's a pretty good chance that this is your state House of Representative currently right now speaking. So I'm gonna go to education, and I'm gonna kind of combine the two questions because I think they kind of tie together. How is a state representative? Because I do see that you are, I think, on the higher education committee when I was doing my research. So how would you ensure, as far as public education? I know, like I say, you're on the college level, but also we'll talk about K through 12 as well. How would you ensure every child has a right to a high quality public education? And what are some things that can be done to help ensure that these underserved schools, including HBCUs, because we know a lot of the funding for HBCUs, I don't think people realize, comes from the state, even though during certain presidential cycles, they do get a lot of funding from the federal level. But for the most part, on a regular basis, a lot of their funding comes from the state. So, what can you do as a state rep, or what have you done as far as legislation presented to ensure that these schools get the resources they need to thrive?
So I think one of the things that we have to be mindful of is our public schools are serving so many students, and so many students across the spectrum of, our state, and in their needs and in their desires, and just like there's just a diverse coalition of students that our educators have to serve in our public schools. So let's start with our teachers. Right now, the state of Georgia is below the national average in the average salary for teachers, and that is a concern. Even though the current governor technically gave a raise over a long period of time, he promised that raise in like 2018, and they just now finally got the last bit of it in our last session. That raise still does not bring us up to the level of where we need to be at a national level. And that is causing a major teacher shortage. You know what else causes a teacher shortage? Disrespecting our teachers. We will not get quality education if we have a government that shows absolutely no respect for the very people that spend the majority of their time with our children during the day, during the school year. And so quality education comes with making sure that we're investing in it. You invest in order to get quality. An investment in our schools is an investment in our students and our investment in our future. And that's what we need to do in this state. And so we need to, number one, have the budget reflect that our education is a priority in our state. True, a very huge chunk of our budget does go to education, but that is based on a formula that was implemented when I was born. And I am celebrating my 40th birthday this year. So it's been a while. A lot has changed in 40 years. Heck, a lot has changed in 4 years, and our education formula has not. So that is something that we absolutely must do. And when it comes to higher education, I will say it's very important that we continue to increase access to higher education. That means that, yes, we keep our Hope Scholarship, but we need scholarships for those who might not necessarily be eligible for Hope. But once they step into that classroom, that college classroom, and see the opportunities that will be afforded to them, they can thrive in a higher education setting. We just need to give them the opportunity.
Thank you. And I'm
That
gonna
was
try to
hard
get
to
this.
answer in 2 minutes.
And I'm gonna try to get this question in before my kids get a little rowdy. So I'm gonna jump down a little bit and then I'll come back up
Okay.
because I think it's a very important question. So we know that I'll put this out there to the audience. There's a recent court case that the Supreme Court is going to oversee, which is Moore versus Harper. In that court case, it will, if it goes the way a lot of these cases have gone, it probably will give the state legislature supreme rule over even federal elections. So again, this is a very important election. The reason we got so many forums focusing on the state legislature is because they're about to have a lot of power over what laws get passed. A lot of these cases that are going to the Supreme Court that are making headlines across the country are state legislative laws that are being passed. So that's why as a Gwinnett NAACP, we're bringing so much attention to these state legislative races, because it's very important that you know what issues they support. Because again, if this case with Moore versus Harper go the way we think it's going to go, then they're going to be the supreme law even over federal election, which means they can change the times, they can cut back early voting even more, they can get rid of absentee ballot altogether. So please, pay attention to how a lot of these answers that we're getting, not only in this forum, but other forums are being answered to make the proper decision, and pay attention to people that don't want to come on and answer questions. But moving on to today's the elections. Do you support the repeal of Senate Bill 202? It's a very controversial bill. It got rid of a lot of the extra ballot boxes that we had around Gwinnett, made it a lot easier for people to vote in 2020. Because the election may have went a different way at the federal level than what it may have done at the state level. There was a lot of changes. Like I said, you can't give people water who are waiting in these long lines. The runoff elections have been cut to a shorter turnaround now. Not giving people a break just from voting, at least give you a couple of months to gather yourself before you go back out and vote again. Now it's a quick turnaround, so we won't have that 2-month lag after the general election, where the election is on January for the runoff. Now the election will be in December, first week in December. So to bring the question back, do you support the repeal of Senate Bill 202? And if you do, why? Or if you don't, why?
So I absolutely support the repeal of Senate Bill 202. Just for everyone's memory, Senate Bill 202 started as a 2-page bill and overnight turned into a 98-page bill full of voter suppression, point blank, period. People try to push back when I call that bill Jim Crow 2.0. But let's be clear, Jim Crow was all about surgically suppressing select voters. And that's exactly what Senate Bill 202 does. Not only do I support repealing Senate Bill 202, I plan to introduce legislation that will repeal every single section of that bill that takes away people's ability to vote or creates a barrier to voting or messes with our election administration, because that's what that bill did. Not only did it do things like allow random people to challenge thousands, tens of thousands of other voters that they don't even know, that they never even met, they know nothing about, but they can just walk into our Board of Elections and challenge 37,500 voters. That's because of Senate Bill 202. Senate Bill 202 took the 20-something absentee ballot drop boxes that we had across the county, making voting accessible for so many people at any time of the day, because now you don't have to go inside the building. You don't have to get out of the car. That is accessible not only for people who have work schedules, but also for our disability community. Senate Bill 202 took those boxes away and instead stuck them inside of early voting precincts between specific hours, and only five in the entire county. That makes no sense. So I support or I do not support Senate Bill 202, and in fact, plan to introduce legislation to give us our rights back to the ballot box.
And I'm glad you brought up the challenges that the bill had. We had over 30,000 challenges here in Gwinnett. Thankfully, thanks to President Poole and her hard work behind the scenes with the support of not only our branch, but the state NAACP, the Georgia NAACP, our state conference branch, we were able to get those challenges thrown out. That so I always say the NAACP doesn't pat itself back enough when we do get wins. We do a lot of work. We're all volunteers from the president on down. So nobody's getting paid for doing this. So this thankless work in terms of we don't have any monetary, but it's reasons like that or things when those type of things happen where we can get people's voting rights back or restored, where they can't be purged off the road. That's a win. That's a huge win. And we'll keep.
Quickly, let me interject our community partners that took place with that. That was the Lawyers Committee for Equal Justice Under the Law. It was the Georgia People's Agenda. It was Galeo. It was the APAC. All of these organizations, along with the state, national, and our legal national team, were instrumental in taking over 37,500 challenges off the books. Again, kudos to the coalition.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. All right. So moving on to our next question before I turn it back over to Shaniqua. Around the country, people are making millions from the sale of recreational marijuana. Meanwhile, Georgia police still have the right to criminalize people for possession. If elected, what will you do to ensure that we legalize recreational cannabis and include restorative justice?
So I want to start with the restorative justice part of this, because one of the things that I'm really happy to hear from the Biden administration is that they are leading the charge and creating an example of what we can do and on the basis of restorative justice. Right now, people can lose their ability to get housing, lose their ability to get employment, lose their ability to just move throughout society because of drug charges for small possession of something that in another state, not only could you possess it, you could have it and eat it right in front of the police and nothing would happen to you because it is legal there. So it doesn't make sense that we have people whose lives are upended by something that, number one, is a plant, number two, is not any more dangerous than any of the other things that are already legal in our state, and number three, that is just legal across the country already. And so we need to follow in the footsteps of the president, commute those sentences, get them off of people's records so that they can go on and thrive in their lives without this on their back. As far as legalization, I was there in the fight when we fought for cannabis oil, for medical cannabis, and I will continue to fight for Georgia to be on an even playing field with other states when it comes to legalizing and using the money that we legalize marijuana for, and especially, starting with decriminalization, but honestly legalizing just like other states have done, and using that capital to help our state in ways that, we can use it. It's not like we can't use the funds. We are sitting on a lot of cash. We're not using it for the things we need to use it for. And this is one way that we could do that. And so decriminalize, restorative justice, 100%. But I think we need to look for a pathway to legalization altogether.
Okay. And then just to back up to that question is, have you begun to do that work already?
So I have had lots of conversations with different people in the cannabis spaces about how we can implement policy. The truth is, the cannabis oil fight was so difficult in our legislature, and the biggest hurdle was getting past the Sheriff's Association. And so what a lot of people don't realize is when we finally passed that very, very limited medical cannabis oil bill here in the state of Georgia, one of the quote deals that were made was that, if we give you this, you have to promise not to try to legalize weed later. And the truth is, I don't think that's a promise that should have been made, because we need to move Georgia in the right direction. We don't need to be the last to move this train forward. We need to move, we had honestly need to recognize the medicinal properties of THC, and instead of being afraid of it, learn about it. We should be using this time to do research on how cannabis can help. When you have opioids out there that are ruining people's lives, and there are alternatives such as THC that are a lot less addictive and could actually be helpful to people, that's what we need to be looking into. We should not be continuing to make it illegal.
Thank you. Before I move on, I will move on if there are no questions from our viewers. If you do have a question, feel free to put it in the chat, and then we will try to answer it.
This is your opportunity to speak with Dr. Clark one-on-one. We are getting, do you need to get a sip of water, take a break? We've been grilling you.
I'm good. You know, I appreciate this forum. I appreciate this opportunity to answer these questions. And I'll be honest, these are some tough questions, but these are the questions that people care about. These are the actual questions that I get sometimes when I go to a door and I knock on that door and a person's like, well, what about this? People care about these issues. So I'm glad that you all are highlighting these issues. And I'm here for the grilling, because I mean, y'all, I'm asking you all to send me back to that state capitol to work for you. And I can't do that if I am not listening to the things that you care about.
Awesome. So with that, let's move on to our next question. Bail is a tool used in the criminal justice system to ensure that those that have been arrested will come back to court. For the last few years, groups and lawmakers have been spreading fear-based messages about bail reform. With crime being up all around the nation and recent reports showing that rearrest of those who were released without bail has barely changed, what will you do to support bail reform in Georgia?
So I love this question. And the reason why is because bail is always something that has really bothered me. I understand the premise. As you said, you tell someone this is the amount of money that you have to pay in order to get out of jail. And we know that if you pay this, you can get it back if you come back. And so, you know, that's supposed to be a way of incentivizing people to return to court and to not run off. However, what I see is a system where if a person does not have the ability to pay, they are stuck in jail. And that affects their job, that affects their ability to move around. And let's be clear, when you first get arrested and an officer takes you to jail, you haven't been convicted of anything yet. So you are sitting in jail. Your life is being affected negatively, impacted negatively. And the only difference between you and someone else that did the exact same thing that you did being in that place is resources and the ability to pay to get out. So if the crime was so egregious that you shouldn't be out on the streets, you wouldn't get bail. They wouldn't give you that price. So the fact is they recognize that you can be out. You just got to give us all this money. And I don't think it's right. I think we need bail reform. One of the things I've noticed is in the last 4 years that I've been a legislator, the governor has really rolled back a lot of the criminal justice reform that the previous governor had started to implement. And bail reform is one of them. And now they try to use it again. They use rising crime as a way of justifying, you know, keeping people locked up that haven't been convicted. But I'm here to tell you, if they really cared about crime, then they would actually do things like not have more and more guns on the street, despite the fact that the gun violence in our state is rising at exponential rates.
Thank you. Thank you. This question is about CRT. So
before we go forward, we do finally have some questions in the chat.
Awesome. Okay.
So if we could have those posted. Okay. This is from Sherry Walker Villa. What makes you different from your opponent?
I love that question.
So that's a really good question. And it's unfortunate that my opponent is not here to respond to the questions of the community. So I will say the first thing that makes me different is I show up. But secondly, I'm different from my opponent because when it comes to protecting people's right to reproductive justice, I will do that. He stands for an absolute, total, no exceptions whatsoever ban on abortion access, and that is a draconian thing that even the people in the GOP have decided they do not want to adopt. Secondly, he is not for increasing access to healthcare, and he really feels like, hey, if you get sick, you should have the money to pay for it, and if you don't have the money to pay for it, then oh well. Third, when it comes to guns, he is all about having guns everywhere. Despite the rise in crime in our communities, he still sees that the Second Amendment is more important than keeping our community safe. And let me be clear, I completely care about the Second Amendment, just like I care about the First and the Third and the Fourth and all the other amendments. But what I do know is that universal backgrounds do not violate the Second Amendment. Making sure that people who have these guns know how to use them and understand the deadly weapon in their hands is not a violation of the Second Amendment. And that's the things that we need to do in our state in order to keep people safe, keep our communities safe. And so me and my opponent could not be any more different when it comes to the policies that you care about, the policies that you have told me that you care about. But number one, when it comes to being asked to be present, what sets me apart from my opponent is I show up.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions in the chat, please? If not, Shaniqua, if you would go forward with our
Sure.
next question.
Sure. So what is your positioning on CRT, critical race theory, which is a college level course? And also, what is your stance on banning books?
All right. So first, I want to say I learned the most about CRT in the last couple of years. I have a PhD in microbiology. I'm at the college level. I didn't even know what CRT was until recently, when all these quote experts on CRT swore up and down it was being taught in our schools when it was not. Instead, what they did was use CRT as a scapegoat to remove actual history from our classrooms and to demonize and dehumanize our teachers and put them in a position to where the things that they have been teaching for years, we all learned about Martin Luther King and Ruby Bridges and all these things. We all learned about slavery, although I will say that our education on slavery could have been a lot better. Either way, now all of a sudden they're like, these things are bad. And that has a chilling effect on our teachers, and it affects our teacher shortage as well. Secondly, you asked about CRT and banning books. As a person who loves books, I do not feel that banning books does anything but make people more curious. So here's what I'm going to say. You can try to ban books in 2022 all you want to. All you are doing is giving those children a guide on where to go and what to read. Because you tell them it's forbidden, they're going to want to see what you're trying to hide from them. But that being said, we should not be taking books out of our classroom. If we really truly support our schools, if we support our teachers, if we support public education, we should be putting more books into the classroom. Taking books away is not what we want to do in a functioning and growing society.
Thank you. Before we move to our section in which we will give Dr. Clark 1 minute to give us our closing, President Poole, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Well, again, before she leaves us, I just want to thank her for showing up. I want to thank her for being consistent in our community, in reaching out, assisting, and helping. And most of all, I want to thank her for being accountable. One of the things that we as the Gwinnett NAACP must do, will do, is to hold our legislative people accountable for their actions and their records. And right now, Dr. Clark, you have stood tall in the state legislature representing the voices of the masses. Thank you for that.
Awesome.
Thank you.
You now have 1 minute to let us know any closing thoughts that you'd like to share.
So, in my last minute, I will number one say thank you to the Gwinnett NAACP for holding this type of forum and for holding me accountable. Y'all did not hold back. Y'all gave me some difficult questions and you gave me some things to think about. Additionally, I want to remind voters that October 11th is the last day to register to vote. And if you or anyone in your household will be 18 by November 8th, please register to vote. This race, House District 108, will come down to the last few votes. And so every single vote will count. You can early vote starting next Monday, October 17th, all the way to November 4th. And if you don't plan on early voting, which I hope you do, please remember that on November 8th, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., you must vote at your designated precinct. And when you go to the ballot, remember who showed up for you. Remember who sat here and took those questions and answered them thoughtfully, who thought it was important enough to hear your voices and answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Again, we so appreciate you for being here and taking the time to ask our voter questions. And we will be sharing this on our Facebook pages as well as our YouTube. So feel free to share it out yourself. And we will make sure that our members have access to it as well.
Awesome.
Also, we would like to extend an invitation to you for our Souls to the Poll, which will be held at the Board of Registration and Elections on October 23rd. That's Sunday, October 23rd. We will be at the main location for the Board of Registration and Elections in Lawrenceville on Grayson Highway from 12 to 7 o'clock p.m. We are giving candidates an open mic. So please come and get your position to talk. And we are opening this platform up to all candidates. So all candidates are welcome. Republicans, Democrats, Independents alike. You will have an open mic on October 23rd. Do
Awesome.
you have any community announcements for us?
For me?
Yes, ma'am.
The only announcement I have is if you're interested in watching the debate, I am holding a little debate party. So be on the lookout. Please follow me on Facebook at Jasmine Clark, HD108. You can also follow my other social media, Jasmine 4 FOR HD108. That's Twitter and Instagram. And be on the lookout for other announcements. Also, if you want to get your steps in, you can always come and knock doors for me every Saturday. Again, follow my social media for more information on when and where we meet.
Okay, and you did give us your website.
Oh, and my website, Jasmine, like the flower, the number 4ga.com.
Okay, great. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
Edward?
Also, while we are talking about announcements, your Gwinnett NAACP would like to announce that on this coming Saturday, the 15th, we will be having a press conference rally at the Gwinnett County Jail on 316 in Lawrenceville. We have been inundated with requests from parents and the community at large regarding incidents that have been happening at our county jail. So we will be there from between 12 and 2 on October 15th. Again, October 15th between 12 to 2 with parents who have questions in regards to their sons who have died at the Gwinnett County Jail. Again, please make that time to come out here, listen, learn what your Gwinnett NAACP is doing on behalf of our families, our community. Shaniqua, are there any other announcements?
Just please make sure to sign up and to do some GOTV with us, whether you're good on the phones, you're good with texting through the computer, or you want to hit the streets. We need more people to help out to make sure we can reach the voters. Thank you for being here tonight.
And reaching out to our youth, we want to make sure to let you know that we are rebuilding our youth organizations. We're rebuilding our youth organization. We're looking for leaders. We're looking for you to hold positions of accountability. There's that word again. We want you to have a place that's safe for you to strive and to thrive. Gwinnett NAACP Youth, Unit 57G. Contact us on our website and ask questions about where we are, where we will be, and how you can connect with us. Edward, do you have any words before we part?
His laptop has went out, so we're going to just sign off.
Okay, well, before we sign off, we want to make sure we leave with one accord. We'd like to end with prayer and peaceful words. If you would please bow your heads. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to come together with one accord as our community seeks your guidance, your face. Please speak for us. Let us know how we need to lead, where we need to go. Give us the words to say. Order our steps. We stand with one accord with our community for your service, your will, for your glory. We ask for peace. We ask for love to prosper in our community, unity to prosper into our community. Help those needing a place to live, food, medical resources. God, show us what and how to do to service our community. We just look for your guidance and leadership. Again, all glory and honor to you. We thank you for all that has been done today. We pray to God, please lift up your God. In my God, Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for joining us, beloved community. Be safe, be well. Let's be one. Bye-bye.